Little Shop of Horrors was released on December 19th, 1986, and has been a classic ever since. Directed by Frank Oz and featuring an all-star cast of Rick Moranis, Steve Martin, Levi Stubbs of the Four Tops, and film newcomer Ellen Greene, this science fiction romance horror comedy is rightfully adored by many audiences and is widely considered a cult classic. With a runtime of 102 minutes, depending on which ending was used, this musical goes down in history as a self-aware comedy that will leave you dancing and laughing. However, as with all movies, it isn't without its pros and cons. Some pros include excellent cinematography and toe-tapping songs that work hand in hand in ways movies seldom do, as well as an amazing use of practical effects. And the cons largely include a story shadowed by subtle yet omnipresent racism. Cinematography is, broadly speaking, the art of filmmaking, using creative visuals to spark an emotional response. It includes editing, camera work, color, and almost anything you can think of that heightens a film from a movie to a work of art. This is usually a collaboration between the director and the cinematographer. Cinematography is important in Little Shop of Horrors because it tackles a unique challenge, taking a script and songs written for a stage and presenting them in a video format. Many of the musical numbers hark back to the stage production, which is incredibly fun to watch. The framing and editing of the musical numbers is almost as important as the music itself, as anyone who's seen a music video can tell you. Little Shop of Horrors, the opening song of the movie, not just the movie itself, is an excellent example of the cinematography. The song opens with a bottle splashing into a gutter in perfect sync with the music. The camera pans up to show the shop where everything will happen, a title card reaffirming this as the Little Shop of Horrors. The camera pans, still not cutting, to a nearby alley where the singers emerge in bright blue, standing out against the bleak neighborhood. The camera doesn't cut until the singers go, "Look out!" cutting to the singers facing the camera directly as a fourth wall break. They're telling the audience to look out, not the characters. This opening number serves to establish the setting and tone of the movie. The camera rises up with the singers' voices and hands and follows where they point to pan into the street below. These singers constantly break the fourth wall and sing to the audience, establishing them as existing not quite within the movie. This is confirmed when Mr. Mushnick and Seymour are not aware of them. This opening number shows that Frank Oz knows exactly what he's doing and will continue to throughout the movie. I have nothing against special effects and the use of computer graphics in today's cinema, but there's something so satisfying about seeing something and knowing that someone really had to build it. It can also help actors perform better when they're face to face with the stuff as opposed to sitting in a blank empty room with dots on their face. Many films nowadays, such as Fury Road and The Force Awakens, openly advertise their use of practical effects over CGI, getting a sort of weird bragging rights from it, like a band releasing an album on vinyl instead of digitally. However, especially under budget constraints, practical effects can be the difference between something mediocre and something great. To see this, you only have to look at the puppet in Little Shop of Horrors. It is insane! Puppets were made of Tooey at differing sizes, and at his biggest size, he required 80 puppeteers to maneuver. To make his movement seem fluid and realistic, scenes with Tooey were filmed at 12 or 16 frames per second, and then sped up to the normal 24 frames per second. In scenes containing human actors, they would play his lines at a slower speed, pitched up to be legible, and the human actors would have to pantomime their lines in slow motion, so that when it was sped up, it still looked realistic. This is specifically shown in certain songs, such as Feed Me, or Get It, and Mean Green Mother from Outer Space. They are perfect examples of how flawless the effects in this movie are. Human actors have to interact with the singing and dancing puppet, and Rick Moranis' pantomiming is so good, I honestly didn't notice he was sped up. They also make sure to have as little shots as possible where Tooey and Seymour are actually in the same frame, cutting instead to close-ups on their faces very frequently. Making a large plant sing convincingly is no small feat. Mean Green Mother has multiple small plants singing as well as tons of leaves and roots moving around. 80 people working on it is not at all surprising. The attention to detail in the construction and performance of Tooey is a significant reason why this movie is so memorable and loved. Race in movies has a very long history. From racist caricatures to whitewashing to directors of color finally creating movies that reflect their own experiences, it's incredibly hard to separate art from greater issues, and cinema is no exception. Racism in movies is unfortunately very commonplace, which makes being able to identify it and condemn it when it's present extremely important. Often black people were portrayed as less than human. In the words of Karen Ross, quote, "The differentness of black people was deliberately exaggerated to demonstrate their essential dissimilarity with white people, their lack of sophistication exemplified by their enjoyment of singing and dancing, which further reinforced assumptions about their primitive and uncivilized natures." Let's look at the movie now that we have a background on race in general. Skid Row / Downtown, one of the first songs in the movie, implies that this is a story about class struggle, not race. People of all races and ethnicities sing together about the struggles they face and a dream of a better life. It's easy to ignore that the entire main cast is white, with the exception of Tui, which I will touch on later, and that all the black people within the song are either the uneducated street urchins or homeless. They're all in this together, guys. Kumbaya. However, the extremely worrying piece of the film that goes beyond just subtle prejudice is the coding of Audrey II, also known as Tui, as a black man. For one, he's voiced by Levi Stubbs, the only black person in the main cast and only black man in the entire movie who isn't an extra. Just look at Tui's backstory. A total eclipse of the sun, blackness quite literally blocking out the light, just so happens to occur as a group of black doo-wop singers, again, a black art form, sing. Black music heralds the inciting event that starts everything, and the rest of Tui's songs are in a very R&B style as opposed to the musical ballads of the white singers, further showing that he is different from the white members of the cast. Tui is also a giant pair of lips, harkening back to very old racist caricatures of black people. According to the filmmakers, this is all unintentional, although they did look for someone with a, quote, street voice, unquote, to play Tui. But whether consciously or no, Little Shop of Horrors tells a dark story of what would happen to white America with the literal growth of black culture. It captures white anxiety about integration and a fear of the spread of black culture, and what makes it so insidious is that it's easy to completely miss it. It's also entirely possible it wasn't even intentional, but it doesn't change the fact that Little Shop of Horrors portrays bloodthirsty aliens bent on destroying civilization as black. Yikes. While you can enjoy Little Shop of Horrors without being racist, you can't pretend it's completely free of flaws either. Part of the great thing about musicals is that you're so busy singing along that you don't realize the deeper symbolism and amount of work that went into them. In the case of the anti-blackness, it's also part of the worst things about them. You completely miss it until you look deeper. Regardless of good or bad, Little Shop of Horrors knew exactly what it wanted to do and how to do it. The opening song shows us the setting and the characters with some fourth wall breaking narration. Get It and Mean Green Mother show us the power and motives of Tui and the incredible work that went into creating him. And, unfortunate as it is, doo-wop gives us a perfect metaphor for the racism within the movie. Despite all of this, they're also extremely catchy songs, and watching them without having a second thought about the deeper meanings is entirely common. I love Little Shop of Horrors and always have. I knew Tui was coded as black, as his accent isn't exactly subtle, but realizing the extent of the racism within it was a wake-up call. I still love it, but you can't really love something without acknowledging its flaws. And acknowledging the racism within a movie while also recognizing it was influential or otherwise significant is really the only way to fully appreciate it. Now, if you'll excuse me, I'm going to go listen to Mean Green Mother from Outer Space again. Bye, and don't feed the birds.
You got no idea. You don't